All right, looks like we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Very excited that you could take the time, whether you're here with us live or watching the replay, to sit down and learn some stuff about getting published. And that's the theme for this webinar. We have a new year coming up, we just had a new year coming up. You can tell it's been a long 2020. But hopefully we want to help you start off 2021 in a good way. And hopefully, if you haven't been published yet, this webinar will help you get your first paid publication. And I'll talk about this more in the webinar, but I think a common myth is that a lot of people that are starting out have to work for free or get these really low paying jobs, and that's just not the case. You can start right away, getting really good high paying jobs, and throughout this webinar I'll show you exactly how to do that. Also, if you are interested, we are currently having a free month offer. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end, but I just want to make you aware of it. If you are interested in that, definitely stick around. And we have some exciting stuff coming up in the near future, so if that interests you too, you'll definitely want to sign up and see what we have in the store. So without further ado, let me get into the slides and start showing you how to get your first paid publication. All right. So, like I said, this is about how to get your first paid publication in 2021. And I'm going to be breaking this down into very actionable steps, and you don't need any, experience. You don't need anything particular to accomplish this. You just need the motivation to self-start and to get the results that you want. Now, the first thing that I want to mention is that what I'm going to be talking about today, which is writing for publications, is something that you do not need a portfolio for. You do not need any experience whatsoever. I'm going in the webinar today, I'm going to be sharing with you techniques that you can use that require zero experience. And I get this question so much because I think it's sort of a myth that in order to start you need experience, and that's sort of a catch-22, because if you don't have experience, how do you start? And but with the techniques that I'll be sharing with you, you do not need any experience. You don't need any published work. You don't need any portfolio of any sort. You can just get started from scratch. And I know that kind of sounds almost too good to be true, but with what I'm about to show you, I think it'll make a lot of sense. Now, there are basically two options, there's a two-step process, which is number one, finding publications in your niche, and two, pitching those article ideas to those publications. And that's it. That's really just a simple two-step process that anybody can do. And you can see how this doesn't require any experience, because all you're coming up with is you're just coming up with new ideas. You're pitching this to publications, and that's how you are getting paid published work. And throughout the webinar, I'll be sharing different tactics, search techniques, strategies to help you find publications and to come up with article ideas. But I just want to give you this overview to show you how easy it really is. First, I want to talk about how to find publications, because this is a question that we get a lot, and it's the obvious first step. You want to find a publication before you come up with article ideas, because you need to customize your article ideas for the publication. And this is really easy. This is the first step in the process, and I promise it is extremely painless. So if you've been intimidated by this kind of stuff before, I hope that this will, it'll go easier on you. So let's talk about how to know what to look for, because I think that's one of the hardest parts, right? I remember when I was starting out looking for publications, it was really tough because I just didn't know what I was looking for. I was like, how can I find a good publication if I don't know what I'm looking for? Basically, what you want to look for is what I call medium level blogs. And these are publications, and I'm using kind of blog and publication interchangeably here, but these are publications that are kind of big enough to where they can pay writers, but not so big to where they, will kind of argue that they can just pay you an exposure, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But these medium level blogs are just the sweet spot for what you want to be looking for. Now, like I mentioned, small blogs kind of have problems. These smaller publications often just can't afford to pay writers, and then the bigger ones often don't pay writers because they argue that they provide exposure. And both of these are really bad for writers, especially if you're starting out, right? Because you want to get paid for what you do. And I have seen this happen to where, we'll advise people and they will get their first job and it's paid. And a lot of people that have had that happen, they said, I didn't think this was possible. I didn't think that you could start out right out the gate, and get paid for it, but you really can. But the trick is to look for these publications that are in between, so they're not so big to where they don't pay writers, but they're also not so small to where they can't. Now, how do you identify these medium level publications? Because it can be kind of tricky to know, to identify them as medium level unless you know what you're looking for. Some of the signs are having lots of bylined authors. And of course, the byline, for those of you who don't know, is the little line that says by Ian Chandler or by Jacob Jans, or, by whatever your name is. And it gives you credit for that article. And if you come across a publication that has many bylined authors, that's really good because that means that they generally hire freelancers to do the work, and that also generally means that they'll pay. An active comments section is also a good plus. It's a good sign of a healthy publication that's pretty active, and the more active it is, that means the more readers there are, and that means the higher the budget is for the publication, which means, of course, they can obviously afford to pay writers. An active social media presence and a comment section on social media is also a really good sign. And positive press, too. If you see this publication being referenced online or being talked about, that's a really, really good sign. So these are just a few quick bullet points to hit. I'll show you later in depth how to find out, whether they pay and how much they pay and all that stuff. But when you're just looking at things from, a bird's eye perspective, this is the kind of stuff you want to look for. And the most important thing is to look for a writer's guidelines page. And this is the page that has all of the information you need to pitch the publication. And this is going to tell you, how much they pay, how they pay, what kind of content they're looking for, all that stuff. And this is such an important page because it's literally your gateway to being able to write for the publication. And if you don't follow it, then you will most likely get rejected. But if you follow it, you're much more likely to be accepted and get paid for it. And this, like I said, it has information about payment, how to contact the editors, basically everything you need to know about how to write for that publication. And you need to learn to read this very carefully, and I mean, to the letter. If you don't meet all of those guidelines, then your pitch is probably going to be rejected because most publications, especially these medium-level publications, they have so many submissions, and I cannot tell you how swamped some of these editors are. And if you've pitched before and haven't gotten a response, that's likely why. But it comes down to ultimately following the guidelines, and editors will often, they're so busy that they can't pursue any pitch that doesn't meet all their guidelines, and they're there for a reason. So learn to follow those to the letter. And some basic searching also goes a long way when you're looking at just, finding publications in a general sense when you're first starting out and saying, okay, where can I write? Where can I write for? What publications might publish my work? Or which publications are suitable for my niche or for my interests or for my goals? Just basic Google searching goes a long, long way. This is how I found a lot of the publications that I did when I was doing this strategy. And just simply searching whatever your niche is, plus terms like submission guidelines, can really help you find paying publications. This sounds so simple, but it's so funny because it's one of those things that you don't really think about unless you think about it. It's sort of like if you know about it, you do. If you don't, you're completely out in the cold about it. And ultimately, you're looking for a writer's guidelines page, and sometimes those will be called different things like the writer's guidelines, Write for Us, submission guidelines, guest post page, editorial guidelines sometimes. These are all terms that you may want to search for when you're looking for publications that have these pages that mean that they accept freelance work. And advanced search operators can also help. These are search techniques that you can use to narrow your results and get just more specific results for your search term. So for instance, you can do an exact search, which is putting quotes around a word or a phrase just to make sure that that exact phrase, that exact term shows up. And you can also search a specific site. So if you have maybe a certain site in mind, or maybe you find one through searching and you're not entirely sure, if they take a freelance work or not, you can use this site : command just in Google to search a single site for different kind of results. And I'll show some examples here. But these are, I think, two of the more common search operators. You can look up advanced search techniques and operators. Just Google that term and you'll find a lot of articles about it. But in my experience of looking for these are the two operators that I've used the most, and the exact search is really good. I can't tell you how many times I've used that. I pretty much use that on a weekly, if not daily basis. It's such a useful search operator, and this works in any search engine, whether that's Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever. It works with all of them. So here's some example searches for, let's say, the travel niche. So if you're looking for travel publications, you might search something like travel and then just submission guidelines in quotes. And what this is telling Google is to search for the term travel and then to only give you pages that have the specific phrase submission guidelines. So this means that you're only going to get sites about travel that have a submission guidelines page. And, of course, that means that these are publications or websites that take material from freelance writers. And this is where those other alternate terms like writer's guidelines and Write for Us come into play, because different sites call their writer's guidelines page, different terms. So what you'll want to do is, if you can't find any results for one term, just substitute another in. So instead of submission guidelines in between the quotation marks, you would have writer's guidelines, for instance. And if you wanted to search a specific site for a term, so let's say you wanted to search the website travelerstales.com, you would put site : and then no spaces after that, just the site URL, travelerstales.com, and then whatever terms you want to search for. And actually, in this search example, you could even put quotes around submission guidelines to make sure that you're only seeing if that site has a specific page like that. But you can use this operator pretty much in any way, with any other advanced operators. And these are just, once you start using them, they are so natural. They're so useful. I can't tell you how many times I've used these. It's fantastic. So this is just a little bit of more advanced searching. But that said, most of the searching that I've done really is just very simple. You can just search travel magazine and get results or whatever. It really is just taking the time to learn the kind of searching that works for you, the kind of process that works for you, because you need to be diligent in your searching. If you don't have an approach to searching for publications, then it can get really messy. You can get really discouraged and distracted. So it's very important that you have, at least a strategy in mind, even if it's really rough, on how you're going to go about this. What's your niche? What kind of steps are you going to take? How are you going to narrow down your search? Things like that. Now, to help you find publications, because we don't want to leave you out in the cold here, and we know that searching for publications can be a hassle, and I certainly have experienced that in my career. When you sign up for a free month with us, you will get one of our exclusive members-only resources, that is the Paid Publishers Database. And this is a database of 1,891 publishers that pay writers, and we regularly add to this list too, so we're pretty soon. And I've included a screenshot here just so you can see how easy it is. You can search, you can select different publications as favorites so you can save them for later. You can search by category, and when you information about how much they pay, their writer's guidelines, contact information, all of that stuff, all right there in front of you. Category it's in, all the information that you need. It's a direct link to these thousands of publications that pay writers, and this is a fantastic resource. Especially when you're starting out, a great way to basically have everything handed to you, and I think it's one of our best resources easily. So like I said, when you sign up for a free month with us, as I'll talk about a little later, you'll get this for absolutely free. This comes at no extra cost at all, and if you want to find publications, this is easily the way to go. So getting around till the end to learn a little bit more about the free month offer, and hopefully you'll be able to use this and find some publications that work for you. Now let's talk about the second part, which is how to pitch publications, because finding publications is half the battle, but you could even say it's kind of less than half the battle, because pitching is where things can get really scary. And I've had so many writers, talk to me and say that they're afraid of pitching, and that, that it's a very overwhelming thing. And I think it can be in many ways. But with the techniques I'm going to share with you today, it's going to really, really make that a lot easier. Now, the best way to pitch a publication is to know that publication. So you should ideally be a reader. And this is not necessary. If you're not, you should read at least 5 to 10 articles from that publication, because that will give you a thorough idea of the kind of content they post, whether or not your content would be good for them, whether your styles align, how they lay out the article. All of that's experience, right? And if you already read certain publications and they're in your niche and they're into you, then those are where you want to head first. But if you're not a reader, that's not familiarize yourself enough with the publications of what they publish and who their audience is and all that good stuff. And you want to analyze these, read them casually. You want them for content and style. So in terms of content, what are these detail is at work here? How do they lay out the approach that they take? And then maybe style too. In terms of writing voices used, how are the articles structured? Is the style varied from article to article? Think about when you're looking through and analyzing. And this is all going to give you a really topics they publish, what they look for. And the writer's guidelines page will usually tell you a lot of this information, but there is some information you know from experience. This can take a little while. I don't try to sugarcoat things. I like to, tell it how it is. And unfortunately, sometimes this can take a little bit, especially when you're finding publication. You're first just finding your feed and you might want to write. Finding the initial publication that you want to write for may take. If you persist and if you keep using these analyzing articles like this, it will happen a lot. Also learn a lot more. And I think that is ultimately. Now, once you have found a publication that you want to write for, and this might happen really quickly, it might take a while, but either way, you want to brainstorm some article ideas. And I'll talk about this a little later on, but I just want to plant this seed for now. The article ideas that you come up with should be specific for each publication that you want to pitch for. So you really should not be able to pitch the same article idea to multiple publications, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in a moment. But I would say you want to brainstorm roughly 5 to 15 article ideas, and you want to think about, could you realistically see the blog publishing these articles? Could you see on that website? Does it make sense? Does it fit their style? Think about stuff like that. And you want to compare them to existing articles on the blog. Are they similar yet different? And this is one of the keys to having a good experience and really optimizing your chances for getting published, because you want to make sure that you're kind of the same general perspective, but you want to make sure that they're not that publication has published before. So you submit something to Freedom with Writing. They have an existing article that's called 7 Magazines That Pay Writers $150 or More Per Article. And great kind of formula, and you can use that you could pitch a potential trade publications that pay $200 or more per. Same general idea, but it's a completely different audience because magazines and trade publications have very different audiences, and it's also a different pay range. Sort of article that they would publish, it just hasn't been one that they have published yet. So that's the kind of approach you want to take. You want to make sure that they're different enough to warrant publication on their own. And ultimately, when you're going through this ideation process, you really want to think about what type of article is going to best satisfy the publication's readers. And this is something that I feel is not really talked about a lot. I feel like it's kind of, a hidden secret almost, because in pitching the publications, what I've learned is that what editors want is not just a good article. They want a good article that's going to satisfy their readers, because that's ultimately who the publication is for. You're not trying to impress, or you're not trying to benefit the editor, the readers. That's what the editors want, and they're the ones who are going to be saying yes or no to your pitch idea. So when you have the audience of the publication in mind, in their shoes, and think, okay, if I were a regular reader of this publication, what content would I find valuable? That's when you'll really unlock the good ideas, I think, and you'll be able to take a much more focused approach to coming up with article ideas, and to communicating with editors about goals and things like that. Thing you can do here is to look at the comments on both the publication's site and sometimes you'll come across readers asking for specific topics, or maybe talking about specific topics. You can see which articles are popular, which ones maybe are not. There's all of this information to fine-tune your approach and help yourself come up with more more tailored ideas, more customized ideas. When you're going through this process, you're going to come up with a lot of ideas, but you ultimately want to settle on just one idea to pitch. And when you're ready, you would, just pitch like you would for a print publication start your pitch off and you pitch your article in 1 to 2 3 sentences each. If you're interested, we have some videos on our YouTube channel and past webinars that go over this topic, so I would highly recommend checking those out. But more importantly, I'm only going to be able to briefly go over. We have an entire course on pitching that you'll get for free with the free month offer, and we have an entire article. So when I'm talking about all of this, I want you keep it in the back of your mind, but also if you want to learn more about it, there's definitely better avenues in our courses. Look for a short intro, pitch your article in 1 to 2 concise paragraphs. Keep it really short. That's the thing I see with pitches a lot. You want to keep these almost too short. And this is one of my little tips that I have kind of discovered over the years. When you end with I can have this ready in a week. Does that sound good? That really engages the editor. When someone asks you a question, you feel just obligated to respond, and that's what's at work here. It's your response rate for pitches. So if you haven't gotten a response, if you've maybe pitched before and have never gotten a response back, try this technique out of ending with a question, and I think you'll be surprised at how many responses you get. And this is the important, I think maybe even more important than the pitch itself sometimes. After a week or two, if you haven't gotten a response, follow up. This is so critical. Following up can often mean the difference between publication and rejection. When Jacob is also the not only the co-founder of Writing Launch, but of course the founder. He gets pitches all the time, and he often tells a story about how 2 writers who both pitched him, and they both just fell through the cracks because his email inbox got swamped, and it was just one of those situations where they just got lost in the mix. And one of those writers followed up and the other one didn't. And the one that followed up got the job got the gig because they were able to say, hey, I pitched you, can you take a look at this? And that meant all the difference. And that's the thing too, is when you're pitching, I have writers who get discouraged because they don't get responses. And like I said earlier, if they don't see something in their inbox, if it's maybe lost in the shuffle, if it's way on another page or something like that, it's usually not going to be something so focused on all of the new submissions coming in. So if most editors will see that and be more than happy to read your pitch, and often you'll get the job as a result of that. If you have a good pitch, that is going to be, the follow-up can really seal the deal. Now, I mentioned some members-only resources earlier. This is another one that I want to share with you. When you sign up for a free month with us, you'll get a course that's literally focused on getting your first publication. Think of it as this webinar, but way more in depth. And it's a 7-day crash course, so it's not a long course. This is a really action-heavy course. It's very participatory, and over the course of a week, you will be thrown right into finding a publication, studying that, crafting your pitch, and then sending it off, and then what to do after that. And this is, I think, one of my favorite courses that we have because it's so short and you can repeat it. So, you can use this as a guideline to finally get your first publication and do it in a more regimented fashion. So you have a guideline to adhere to. It's very easy. One little step every day over the course of a week helps you get published. And we have other courses that kind of cover this, but if you're just looking to jump in and, finally bite the bullet, this is the course for you. If you are enjoying this webinar so far, I would highly recommend signing up for the free month with us and taking this course. It is so good. It will give you the structure that you need to finally send out pitches and finally get your first paid publication. So if this webinar has motivated you to really, find that drive in you to get your first publication and start off 2021 by getting a byline, then this course is definitely for you. So I hope that you check that out. And another resource I want to mention, in addition to us having a pitching course, an entire course on pitching, and a pitch template that you can use to basically, fill in the blanks, customize it a little bit, and send it off, we also offer expert pitch feedback. And I think this is something that maybe not a lot of people know about, but we offer unlimited email coaching as part of a membership. So even if you just sign up for a free month, that means you can get a month of free email coaching. And a lot of that is pitch feedback, where you can learn directly from me. I personally respond to all of these emails. Whenever I get a pitch sent, I critique it in as much detail as I can, and honestly, a lot of the pitches I get are good. They just need a little bit of tweaking, and then I hear back and they say, oh, I've gotten published. And I love having moments like that, and I love being able to help people so directly like that. So when you sign up, you will get that other resource that I think a lot of people don't utilize, which is getting feedback directly from me. And, at this point, I've put 5-6 years into my pitching strategy, and I have figured out what works for me, and I can help you find out what works for you. So I hope if you're interested in this and finally getting published in 2021, I hope that you do take advantage of this, because there is, this is one of my favorite things to do at Writing Launch. It's, I love giving these webinars. I love doing the courses, but I really, really have a special place in my heart for being able to help people one-on-one. So I hope you take advantage of that if you decide to join up with us. Talk about something a little different, which is how to cultivate relationships with editors. And I think this is important because in previous webinars, I didn't have this section, and it was just kind of about how to find publications and how to pitch them, and there were no next steps. But when you are developing a pitching process, you really need to keep that momentum going, and you need to have an idea of what you're going to do next. So that's why I'm talking about this, because at the end of the day, hopefully when you're pitching, you can cultivate positive relationships with editors that hopefully lead to more writing opportunities. So let's talk about how to build good rapport with editors. Most of it is really just reading and following the publication's guidelines. That's it. It sounds really simple, but it works. It's so effective because, as I mentioned earlier, editors are really busy, and if you're not following the guidelines, that means, it comes off as if you don't care, right? And I've seen myself, and I've heard Jacob talk about so many bad pitches where people obviously have not read the guidelines, and you don't want to be that person who just completely ignores all the guidelines. So if you read and follow them, that's already starting off on a good foot, and often that will that will do the bulk of the work for you in establishing a relationship. And of course, you want to maintain a polite, professional tone with the editor, or if you're talking with multiple editors, obviously stay nice, stay respectful of their schedule and their time. You want to keep all of your responses as short as you can, keep your pitch short, keep it to the point. You don't want to be rude or abrupt, but you do just want to send shorter emails and messages so that you can give the editor the biggest chance to really read through everything and respond. And the longer your messages are, the harder that will be. So you definitely want to keep your emails on the shorter side and just respect their time. And after you've gotten published, you already have an in with that editor, and you can build off of this. And I've actually used this to pitch more articles and develop a relationship with the publication. And this is a fantastic way of getting more work because you can keep that momentum going, because once you've gotten published, that editor knows that you do good work, right? And that editor has experience with working with you and your writing and your style and all of that. So when you pitch more articles, that editor remembers you, and over time this can create a good relationship with that editor, with that publication. And this is even a possible pathway to becoming a regular contributor to the publication or a staff writer. And so you can see how quickly this can go from just finding a publication to becoming a regular paid contributor to the publication. And this happens a lot more often than you would think. Now, some publications do have jobs that you have to apply for, but generally, what I've done in the past is just to keep submitting articles, and then eventually, I either get to a point where I'm sort of a quasi staff writer or where I get that official position. But really, the important thing here is just keeping that momentum going and taking action, and really, not easing up on the process. Because I think once you get published, the hardest part is over, and you can just keep writing that and using that to drive yourself forward. Now, as part of this webinar and as part of our free month offer, which I'll talk about in a moment, with the new year comes a lot of new possibilities and just a chance for renewal. And we want to help you accomplish your goals this year. So what we want to do is offer you just, the support that you need over the next month. And I mean, beyond that, but specifically over the next month to finally get published. I know there are so many of you who have not gotten published yet and who are, either afraid to or just discouraged to, or maybe you just haven't had the time yet, or maybe you're just starting right now. No matter which approach is yours, we want to offer you all the support that we can. And so as hopefully if you join us up for the free month, if you do, we have some general 1 month goals that we think are pretty useful to follow. And if you do follow these and set these goals for yourself, I think you'll be able to have a really good targeted approach at this whole goal of getting published and of finally biting the bullet and getting to work. So hopefully within the next month, you'll be able to land your first paid publication. And like I said, hopefully you can do this with the help of our 7-day crash course that is free with the free month. And if you want to take our other pitching system course or our course on writing for publications, you can do that as well. But ultimately, we want to make sure that you are landing your first paid publication within the next 30 days. And also, when you get your first publication, you'll be able to start your portfolio. Even if you just have the one piece in your portfolio, that's fine. That's the kind of thing that you just want to start it. You don't need to wait until you have 5 awesome pieces to start your portfolio. Just start with baby steps. Start with the first publication. That's what's most important. And hopefully you'll also have an actionable strategy for getting your next paid publication. So you want to make sure that you have developed a system over the next month to where you understand, the kind of publications you're looking for and the kind of process that works best for you. And over the next month, we'll help you fine tune that. And something else that I need to mention too is on these courses, we have comment sections that are really active, and I always respond to people on there too. And of course, we have the unlimited email coaching, so there's no shortage of support from both myself, Jacob, and your fellow writers in the Writing Launch community. But all that is to say that we really want to help you drill down and come up with an actionable strategy for getting not only your first paid publication, but successive ones. So now let me talk a little bit about the free month offer, because this is something that I'm really, really excited about. We've been doing this for a while because of the pandemic. We don't think that there should be barriers, financial barriers to receiving this kind of tuition. And so we are offering a free month of tuition, which is normally $47, to receive everything that we have. There are no gates in place. You get access to literally all of our material. And these are a few resources, just a few that I thought I would point out to illustrate how they can maybe help you in your journey toward getting your first paid publication. Like I said, we have the Paid Publishers Database, which is really, I think, probably our most valuable resource, because it's curating all of these different publications, almost 2,000 into one place that's easy to search, easy to use. And it's really, I always say this is the resource that I wish I'd had when I was starting out, and I still feel that way to this day. So you'll get instant access to that. And of course, the 7-day crash course and getting your first publication. That's another, like I just mentioned, that's a great course if you just want to get started and dive in immediately and take action. And I think it also kind of helps you hold yourself accountable, because you're giving yourself, a deadline. You're giving yourself a challenge. And I think that can really help when it comes to just finally finding the motivation to get started. And you can also learn afterwards from our acclaimed No BS course, which is basically our flagship beginner course. And this takes you through everything you need to know about freelance writing. And we have other courses too, but this is sort of the one that a lot of people start out on. And it's just absolutely wonderful. If you need to learn more about just the ins and outs of freelance writing, that's definitely the course for you. And of course, like I mentioned, you get that personalized feedback on pitches. And again, this is one resource that I think everyone should take advantage of, because I think we are one of the few options, in terms of writing education that provides such personalized feedback on such a regular basis. From what I've seen, a lot of other places, will do maybe live streams or occasional feedback, but we do this regularly throughout the week. And like I said, I've developed an approach of what works for me in terms of pitching, and I can help you find out what works for you. We also have a lot of step-by-step training videos, and a lot of those are on pitching. So if you are, kind of confused about pitching, or you don't know how to improve your pitch, or you don't know how to fine-tune it, all of our videos will help you in that regard. And we have a lot more. I mean, that is just barely scratching the surface. We have, all the courses, all these videos, articles, interviews, masterclasses, all of this stuff. But I really wanted to just direct your attention toward these, because I think these are the most important resources that you can take advantage of as a newer member of Writing Launch. So that free month offer is in effect now. So if you go to writinglaunch.com, you can sign up right now, and I really hope that you do. You'll get a free month, and then if you want to cancel after that, you can just email us and let us know. Or if you want to stay with us and become part of our community, that would be fantastic, and we would love to have you. And if you have any questions about the membership or anything like that, do let me know. And in fact, at this point, since we're kind of done with the webinar itself, I want to open things up to a Q&A. So if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about here, any questions about pitching, about finding publications, about freelance writing, about the Writing Launch membership itself, let me know in the comments. I'll go through and we'll answer as many as we can. And yeah, if I don't answer your question in the webinar today, you can always email me at support@writinglaunch.com. That's support@writinglaunch.com, and we will get to every question. Let me take a sip of water real quick to refresh my my voice, and then I will get started with the Q&A. All right. Let me transition back to camera, and there we are. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the webinar, everybody. This is always a great topic that I like talking about because, you know, I know what it's like to kind of start from scratch, and yeah, I really like taking the time and the opportunity to help people in that way. So let me take a peek at some of these questions that you've added. And like I said, if I don't get around to them, we do have quite a bit of time, but hopefully I'll be able to get to as many as I can. So let me check out these questions real quick. Let's see. Oh, here's a good question. Can you binge learn a course, or is it metered out daily and weekly? Most of our courses are completely self-paced. The No BS course, which is our flagship beginner course, that one is locked to where you get one lesson every day. And that's just because that course is so important that we want to make sure that you are, you know, not rushing through it. And it's a lot of information at once. So we definitely want to make sure that that is pretty easy to follow. But other than that, the courses are completely self-paced. However, I don't really recommend, you know, binging any certain course. And I think this is sort of a misconception about courses as well. Maybe I'll talk about this for a minute or two, because I think binging is sort of, you know, a byproduct of our culture, and you know, a lot of us are used to consuming lots of information at once, especially with things like podcasts and, you know, online courses. But in my experience, when people do that, they tend to just rush through it and not really absorb that information. And then when it comes time to use that information, you know, they kind of run dry. So I don't really recommend binging a course. You certainly can, but we just want to recommend it for the fullest educational experience. You know, the more that you, and the thing about our courses too is that they're very actionable. So there's always, you know, exercises or homework to be doing. And the more you focus on that, the more you're going to get out of the courses. So if you sign up for our free month, I mean, technically you could go through, you know, pretty much all of our material, but I would recommend that you just focus on what is most directly relevant to you right now. And I think you'll get a lot more out of the course that way. I have a question here. I'm seeing this question that I actually addressed during the webinar, but I want to make this just more, I want to, you know, specify about this. Can I use the same pitch for all publications? No, you can't. And like I said, I actually addressed this during the webinar, but I often get this question about simultaneous submissions, you know, and people really want to do this. and like I mentioned, you know, here's a way of thinking about it. Think about all the publications that are in the world today. And I mean, there are, you know, probably millions. I mean, there are so many, if not hundreds and hundreds of thousands. And there's publications for everything. And so with all of that, there are, you know, all these writers that are chomping at the bit to get published, right? You're competing with so many people. And there's just a sea of publications to choose from. So as a result, publications are being, because there is such a large pool of, you know, of writers to choose from. And the publications kind of have to be selective because they don't just want any old content. They want content that's good for their publication. And so if you, let's say you were the editor for a specialty publication. So let's say maybe you wrote about marine biology, okay? If someone came to you and was like, oh, hey, could I give you this article about zoos or about, like, you know, animals in general? they would say, well, no, that's, that's, we need more specific stuff that's tailored for our publication. And that's the way you want to think about it. Using the same pitch for multiple publications means that your idea is so vague that it can be applied to multiple publications. And that means that it's sort of like the old saying, if you do something for everyone, you do it for no one, and that's one point that I really, really want to hammer down, because I think the more you understand that, the better of a chance you'll have at getting published. Because I think beginner writers kind of have this mentality, and I mean, I was there too, where they feel like they have to pitch just a lot, and they have to just go crazy and just take anything that they can get. But in reality, what you want to do is be targeted, be focused with your approach. That will limit the amount of errors that you make, and it will give you a better chance at getting published in a smaller amount of publications. So let's say, for instance, that you took this, kind of shotgun approach, right? Where you just took the same pitch and sent it out to 100 publications. You might get 1 or 2 yeses out of that 100. But let's say you took 100 publications and went one by one and came up with ideas specifically for each single one of those 100 publications. So 100 different ideas for 100 different publications. In that case, you would probably get, I would say probably at least 50% yes, if not higher. That's the amount of difference it makes. And I think, this is a good thing to be talking about, because I think, especially when you're starting out, that's the approach that you want to take, because it seems counterintuitive, but really the less specific you are and the more you just try to go wide, the less of a chance you have at actually getting published. Because like I said, publications are, selective. They really want the best content for their publication, because they want people to be coming to their site for a specific purpose, for a specific type of content, and it's up to you to provide that. So that's what you want to be thinking about. And I think as a beginner, even if you're just starting out, it doesn't hurt to be selective. And I'm not saying that you should, set this incredibly high bar that you can never reach, because we have some, I've had discussions with some people who start out and they have no experience, and they say, oh, I want to write for the New York Times or something like that, or Smithsonian, or the Washington Post or whatever. And I always say, okay, well, maybe go down a little bit, but at the same time, you don't want to take just anything you can get. You want to take a targeted, focused approach, because that will give you the highest return on your investment that you put in. So I hope that cleared things up about that question. And we do go into that approach more in our courses as well, especially the pitching course. Here's a good question too. Should you write the article first or just go ahead and send the pitch? I always recommend just sending a pitch. And this is actually something that I should have covered, so I'm glad that you brought this up. Because here's how you should think about this. Let's say that you were to write an article, and then let's say it's maybe 1,000 words, and it takes you, maybe a day or two to write this article. And you submit it to this publication, and they say no. If you followed what I just said about coming up with ideas that are specific for that publication, that means that you basically have an article that can't go anywhere, right? You've written it for one specific publication. They said no. Now what do you do with it? And that's why I always recommend working for sites that only request pitches, because some sites do request full articles, some request just pitches, and I always recommend going with the publications that just request pitches, because then you're not out anything but an idea. And that's always the way to go, just so you don't potentially waste that time. And I've made that mistake several times. And I think I've seen many other writers make that mistake. A lot of writers come to me and they say, I've written all these articles and they've all gotten no's, and it's a combination of different things, but it's always that approach of, well, if you had not written that entire article, you wouldn't be out all these articles, you wouldn't have them sitting around, you can't use them, you wouldn't have all these no's. It's one of those situations that gets messier the more you do it. So it really, really is important to only submit to sites that just ask for pitches. So that's a great question from Mrs. A, I think, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So yeah, that's a very good question. Let me take a peek. And if any of these are coming up with, if you're getting questions about questions, feel free to ask those too. have a question here. Oh, yeah, this is a good one I get a lot. How do you figure out what your niche is? Yeah, this is a question we get all the time. I think every single webinar that we do, we get this question. The short answer is that we talk about this in our No BS course, and I would address it here. But it's kind of one of those things where it takes so long to talk about, and it's also such a subjective thing, right? So it's kind of hard to give a broad advice on this. I think generally what I always say is that you want to make sure that it's a balance of passion and profitability. And you want to make sure that there's a market for what you're writing about, but you want to make sure that that's something you're interested in. But I don't mean to answer that with a non-answer, but it really is that kind of thing where it would take so long to explain. And it's also just so dependent on the person. And a follow-up question for that was, can you have more than one? Absolutely. I mean, I think most writers tend to have 1 to 3 niches. I rarely have seen professional writers with more than 3 niches, because I think, and this is something else that maybe you want to think about when selecting a niche or when pitching, is that you want to specialize. There's always the debate of generalizing versus specializing, and this is something we talk about in the course as well. But you always want to specialize. If you are just a generalist writer and you can write about anything, that means that you can't really write about anything in depth, and you won't be able to really become an expert at what you're writing about. So always specialize. So if that means just doing one niche at first, that's fine. If that means doing, 2 or 3, that's fine too. I have about 3 niches. I think that I kind of one that I regularly write in, and then like a couple others that kind of, I write less and less about them. But it all depends on kind of not only your interest, but your capacity and your goals too. If you want to become an expert in one niche, then I would say stick to that niche. But if you're fine with just, kind of going in a couple different niches and getting published that way, then I think by all means you should. The only thing I want to warn against is to not take on too many niches. I've come across many writers who email me and say, Ian, I want to write about everything, what do I do? And it's really hard, because I think if there are so many things you want to write about, it can get really tough to narrow that list. But that said, I think if you can just pick one to start with, and just trial and error, see what works, see what doesn't, tweak your strategy and move on like that. But yeah, I wouldn't start out with more than 2. I think if you're just starting out, so if you have no previous publication, if you have no experience, I would start out with maybe just 1 or maybe 2, because at the start, if you are not really focused, you can end up spreading yourself too thin, because when you are so new to it and when you have so much to learn, there's a higher margin of error, because there is so much you don't know. So the more focused you are, the more you can remove the chance of, making these mistakes and getting distracted and all of that. And again, I think it's one of those things that sounds counterintuitive, because usually beginner writers kind of come to me and say, I think I need to do everything. I need to pitch to every publication I can find and, take any job I can get. But it's really not like that. Something I always like talking about is how, as the freelance writer, you are in charge of who you work with. These publications aren't coming to you and, dictating the terms. You are choosing which publications to write for, right? So you are in charge. You get to be the decider of who you write for, and, and all of that. And I think when you frame it in that way, when you realize that you are the empowered one, that really changes the dynamic, and it really changes the way you look at how to find publications and how to interact with them. And of course, you don't want to be acting like you're the boss of the publication, obviously. But my point is that you have a lot more agency than I think it at first seems. And yeah, especially when you're starting out, like I mentioned earlier in the webinar, there's nothing wrong at all with being a little selective. And I think to some extent you do have to be, especially if you are taking a more targeted approach, if you're being more focused in your strategy, you definitely need to be a little more selective. So I hope that answers the question. I'll try to answer maybe 2 more questions, and I think we'll call it a day. Now here's an interesting question. Do publications own the rights of your piece? Are there opportunities to cross-post to your own blog or link to publication? This is a really interesting question, because this is another thing that comes up a lot. And strangely, I've been writing for over 6 years now. I think it's coming up on 7. I've never had an instance where I needed to own the publication. And I think a lot of writers, especially newer writers, get caught up in this idea of ownership. And really that's not a concern, because usually the publication will either own the article or at least own the first rights to it, first publication rights. But I mean, I've never had a problem with that. I've never republished anything. That's not really a thing. I haven't met many writers who do that. And even if you do want to republish, there are avenues for that, but it just doesn't happen that often. But generally, yeah, the publication will own it, or at least just own the first. You can link to it in your portfolio, certainly. As far as cross-posting to your own blog, this is something that I talk about a lot, but I really, if you're a new writer, you should not have a blog. The long story of that, and I could talk about this for hours, is that it's way too much time, effort, and money for a new writer to spend on that. You want to be spending your time on finding paying writing jobs. Having a blog does not pay. Having a blog does not give you exposure. It does not help you get clients or get jobs or get published. And you really, when you're starting out, you want to be focusing on what matters, because if you spread yourself too thin and if you focus on the wrong things when you're starting out, that sets a bad foundation for the rest of your career. And especially if you're thinking about doing this, part-time or full-time, this is stuff that you really want to think critically about. You want to make sure that you're starting off in the best way possible. And sometimes that means making some sacrifices, like not having your own blog or not being able to own an article. But ultimately, I think you'll find that stuff really doesn't matter. I know it sounds counterintuitive. I think a lot of the stuff that I've talked about today kind of sounds counterintuitive, but strangely, that's the way it is. And I think over time, you'll kind of find out that that's how it is. So let me answer one more question, because we have about 2 minutes left, and then we'll call it a day. I see a couple questions about the niches that I write in, and then how did I choose them? Well, I mainly write in, I have 2 main niches. One is marketing and business, and the other one is men's fashion and hair and grooming. And, it was kind of the thing where when I started out, I didn't really know what to write about, and I was gearing toward productivity at the start, because I figured out, okay, that's something that I kind of know about, even though I wasn't very productive. I knew, strategies about it, and I knew the general gist of that niche. And I think I always kind of had a predilection toward marketing and just toward that idea. And I saw that it was not only a booming niche, but also it made a lot of sense to me. It really clicked with me. And I just kind of found it by trying out a lot of different things. That's really how I landed in the niches that I did, is just by trying out different things. And then, over time, as I gained specific interest in things, I started writing about those. So for instance, in terms of marketing, I really was interested in using storytelling in marketing. So I ended up writing a lot about that. And then over the years, as my interests developed and changed, I got more into fashion and more into hair care and things like that. And I just started writing about that because I figured, okay, that's something I'm interested in. There's a market for that. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a balance of passion and profitability. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And I started writing about that, and I'm still doing both of those to this day. So, I mean, it's a mixture of, I was writing about what I knew, but I was also exploring. I was also trying new things. It took me a while. I wrote about so many different things before I figured out what I wanted to do. And I think that trial and error is just part of the process. And that's a part that it's going to be so specific to you. But I hope that you do take the time to allow yourself to go on that journey. So we've reached an hour limit, so I think we'll call it a day. But if you didn't get your question answered, like I said, feel free to email me at support@writinglaunch.com. And I really hope that you join us for the free month. Again, you can just head to our site, writinglaunch.com, and sign up for free for a month there, and hopefully even stay with us afterward if you want. We have unlimited email coaching, support on all these channels. We really hope that you will stick around and see what we have in store. And I hope you've enjoyed the webinar today too. I hope it's helped you. Like I said in the beginning, we want to give you all the support that we can throughout this next month to really help you, light a fire under you to get published finally, and get started on your writing career. And hopefully this webinar has been the first step in that process. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if you need anything, again, email us, And that's going to be it for today. I hope you have a great weekend.